Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, y'all.
All right, let's get started here. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Goldberg. I'm the president of the Sports Entertainment Fashion and Art Law Society at FIU Law. Thank you for joining us for the fourth day of our first ever virtual symposium. I want to thank the panelists, Sharon, Justin, and Cameron for being here today. Just a reminder that there's one final panel tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. So we hope you can also join us tomorrow. I'll now hand it over to Alexis De La Rosa and Madison Berman, who will be moderating the panel today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Madison Berman. I'm a 2L and I'm the Vice President of SEFA. I will be helping Alexis with moderating the panel today. I'll go ahead and hand it over to her so she can introduce herself and the panelists.
Thanks, Maddie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexis, and I'm the Executive Secretary of SEFA. So today on the panel, we have Justin Maya, who is a practicing attorney at Cole, Scott, and Kissane. Justin specializes in intellectual property, business, and entertainment law. Justin is also a graduate from FIU Law. Welcome, Justin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for being here. Next, we also have Cameron Monet, who is a licensed attorney, content creator, and social media strategist. Welcome, Cameron.
Hey, y'all.
And then we have Sharon Turek, who's principal at Turek Law, where she focuses on helping professionals in the advertising, marketing, and creative services industries protect and monetize their intellectual capital and manage the legal implications of their marketing and advertising work. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. So our first question, I actually want to toss it over to Sharon. Sharon, being a second-year law student, we learn a lot about the Constitution. We learn a lot about the rule of perpetuities and civil procedure, but influencer law and marketing really isn't something that we tackle much, if at all. So my question is, what made you get into this subject? Is it something that you fell into? Is it something you've always been interested in?
No, no is the short answer to all those things, except for maybe the fell into. My firm focuses on helping professional marketing services firms, so agencies, consultancies who work with brands on their marketing and advertising projects. And influencer marketing is really sort of a newer generation of traditional, kind of a cross-section of communications, public relations, and plain old-fashioned advertising, using people who've been able to use digital and electronic channels to create platforms for themselves as sort of the new spokespeople for brands. And so it's a combination of various areas of marketing law that didn't sort of mash together the way that they're mashing together today. So that's how we've come to focus on it, and part of our practice of counseling agencies on how to do it well and legally.
And you, Justin?
For me, I don't think it necessarily fell into it. It was kind of it started to grow in 2014, 2015, if everyone recalls, like Fire Festival. That kind of was the tipping point when you started to bring in the FTC to really oversight what was going on with influencer marketing. But at that time, I was doing a lot with work with DJs, music, and we really could understand the power of social media. And that was sort of the way that you started growing and just understanding social media. I kind of just jumped on that train.
Interesting. And Cameron, you're an influencer and you're an attorney. So how did you fall into that?
Yeah, so I love that Justin brought up 2014, 2015, because that's really when I got into the influencer space. I started on YouTube and I had no idea that I wanted to go to law school at that point. Decided I wanted to go to law school, had no idea I was going to kind of stay in the influencer space when it came to pursuing my law profession. And then I kind of fell into it. I started realizing when I was in law school, like the importance of contracts, the importance of knowing the law, of course, that's what we learned in law school. But then I started to see where there was this perfect mesh between the two, where there was a need. And I love hearing other attorneys say that they fell into it, or they're like, I saw opportunity, because we definitely need to pave the way in this space, because there needs to be some laws in place. As an influencer, I see it all the time where other influencers have no idea how to protect themselves or no idea that there's even laws around what they're doing. So I kind of just found a way to mesh them both. It really just kind of happened.
So our next question is kind of for all of the panelists. How would you say that the industry has changed within the past 5 to 10 years? And where do you see the industry moving in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm happy to jump in and tell you what we're seeing in terms of from a pure marketing perspective. I think what we're seeing is the increase in opportunities for what I'll call micro influencers to really put together deals that look like what celebrity endorsement deals looked like probably 10 years ago. Brands are increasingly understanding that they don't necessarily have to work directly with traditional celebrities to make an impact with influence marketing. In many cases, they're doing much better striking deals with people who have built up smaller but really super loyal communities. And so what that means, though, on the legal side of things, is that the way you document and contract for these deals today looks a lot like how we used to look at celebrity deals just a few years ago, because increasingly you have to address things like intellectual property ownership, FTC compliance, for a micro influencer, just the way you used to have to for a celebrity. So that's the way I see, that's the biggest evolution I'm seeing, just from the perspective of the agencies that we work with and the deals they're putting together.
I see the same thing as well. Just to piggyback on that, it's such a new industry. It's growing. We're grappling with the laws. The courts are grappling with this situation more now than ever. When you look at some of, for example, the experts in this area, when it comes to marketing, advertising on billboards, TVs, commercials in the entertainment industry, it was hard to capture a lot of the analytics, the data that you can now have with social media. And that's powerful for an influencer who's negotiating like a celebrity deal, because you now have the ability to point to specific analytics to show exactly who is viewing your post or your content on YouTube, for example. And that helps you leverage your negotiation upwards. Whereas 10 years ago, it was very hard to capture some of this data. How many people specifically were driving by a billboard, for example? It was hard to quantify that information. And so with that data, you're able to really change the ways that you negotiate deals for an influencer. Or on the flip side, the brand, when they're negotiating with an influencer, the lack of that data helps to drive the numbers down. So there's two ways to look at it. The data that you have, though, as an influencer, a lot of times they don't realize it may just go away, it may just delete. Storing that information, giving it to the brand for litigation down the road is also extremely valuable. So this data that is being created, whether it's through the platform itself or third-party software, Social Blue Book, for example, is a really good platform that allows you to evaluate your platform, much like if you're going to evaluate a car when you're going to go sell it in. It helps you negotiate, and that's a very powerful tool. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, they pretty much covered it all. That's 100% true. I'm going to keep doing this, but throwing it on the influencer space, being in the shoes of the influencer, it makes it a little bit difficult to communicate the importance of certain things to lawyers and to like this legal professions, because it's different when you're in the position and you're actually doing the work. So I think what I am seeing a lot more is that lawyers, legal professions, even businesses, small businesses of all kinds are starting to really do research on social media, the importance of social media. How are these influencers creating the content? What hats are they wearing? Why should we pay them a certain amount? And using sources like Social Blue Book, and also there's other websites that now they can track to see, like, are they buying followers, things of that nature, that really are starting to make this a profitable career and profession, because you're not able to just, oh, it's social media, I can buy followers and all of those things. Businesses are like, no, I can see whether or not this is a credible platform and if they actually have a target audience in which they can promote my product. So I think it's just going to continue to go up from here, and maybe even lean more into the influencer marketing space when it comes to businesses and incorporating that into their marketing plan. So I think it's only up from here, really.
Cameron, I want to touch quickly upon something that you just said. So we know that influencer marketing fraud, like purchasing followers and creating sort of fake personas, was expected to cost brands around $1.3 billion in 2019 alone, based on research from a cybersecurity firm, Check. So how do influencers, how do brands navigate this red flag as far as influencer marketing goes?
I think by really bringing out the analytics, just like what was said earlier, influencers, we are able to see the back end even more than brands. Even when they use certain platforms and websites and resources, we see a lot more than they can. So really putting emphasis on that. If I can see, okay, I had 100 people swipe up or click this link, as opposed to, you see I have X amount of followers, the swipe ups and the links are always going to hold a lot more weight. If I'm a business and I'm trying to promote a product, I don't care how many followers you have. I want to know, can I get my return on my investment? So I think brands are definitely going to lean more on like the analytics, the insights, and knowing, hey, if I give you this product, can you tell your audience to go see it? And yes, it's not always all about, are they going to purchase? Some brands are reaching out to influencers because they want the exposure. And then over time, when you work with them long term, which I see a lot of creators as well as myself, really leaning in on long-term partnerships more, because as we know in marketing, someone has to see something, 7 to 9 times or more before they even purchase. So leaning more on just the analytics side is definitely going to be more important, even more so than the followers. Because at the end of the day, if I can sell to 1,000 people, that's just as good, whether I have 1,000 followers or 20,000 followers. If I can sell to 1,000 people, that's the goal.
Hey, just to piggyback right there on that point, because that's a great point. It really, you don't lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it comes down to certain types of principles from the legal profession, from the law student side of things. And contract law is a great way to address these things through representations and warranties that you insert into the contract. I've seen influencers may have a screenshot showing very good days, and when they had high conversions on swipe ups, they show that screenshot and they give it to the brand and say, hey, look, this is what I can offer you for the conversion for your return on your investment. So by inserting a representation to the contract when you're negotiating on the side of the brand, for example, saying, in the event you don't get me this many views or this many as you're holding yourself out to, we're going to adversely affect your compensation, or we're going to have certain types of stipulations. So that way it puts more pressure on the influencer to ensure that they are going to meet that return on the investment. And so contract law is a great way to address these points so that you're not just kind of in the 2016 days was very wild west when it came to this sort of, look, I just have followers, trust me. Now it's more of a trust and verify.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at the end of the day, the impact of any particular influence campaign is going to be a combination of a preset understanding between the brand, the influencer, and then the agency, if there's one involved, in putting them together. And what are the goals, and what are the milestones and the metrics we need to have available for everybody to see, to know whether we've achieved them, right? And that's the data and the analytics that Cameron and Justin were talking about just a minute ago. But that's also got to be reflected in a well-drafted agreement between the influencers team and the brands team about what the expectations are, how they're going to be measured, and who's going to be legally responsible for the compliance aspects. Because it doesn't matter if you're hitting your metrics if there's a public relations gaffe regarding the influencer, or if there's an intellectual property misuse that ends up costing the brand more time and energy to fix or correct than the campaign's performance would warrant. So it's really a combination of deciding what your goals are, making sure they're reflective in the right measurements, and then making sure all of that gets translated into the contract that the parties sign up front.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to play devil's advocate really quick, because whenever I'm reviewing contracts, I'm leaning on the influencer side. I'm always working with influencers. I don't work heavily with brands. Every once in a while I do, but social media is a unique space, as we all know, but it's not sometimes as simple as 10 days. I can always convert. I can have 10-day track. I can show you even a month long where, hey, every day I'm getting X amount of views. Every day I'm getting X amount of traffic. And then Lord forbid, there's something that happens either in the world or in society, and that does affect social media. So part of that in a contract, when I'm negotiating, is I keep that little caveat in there. Like, although this may be with the metrics that I'm consistently doing, I can't control what happens ultimately on social media and then what happens in our society, because anything that happens worldwide, like the Black Lives Matter movement, is going to affect social media, and then it's also going to affect our brand collaboration and partnership. So making sure that you're including that as well, and understanding that sometimes social media is more like a billboard where you can't track the metrics. You see the traffic, you see people, but I cannot always guarantee, hey, I'm going to get that 100 click, but I can guarantee you're going to get the exposure. And if you continue to work with me, I can get you to where you need to be.
I agree. And sometimes it's not even about that kind of metric. Sometimes it truly is about the content collaboration as a springboard to a further partnership between the influencer and the brand, which is going to be reflected in maybe more traditional marketing work to comes down the road. So it really is a matter of what are your business goals with this collaboration, and then let's make sure that gets translated into whatever agreement that you sign.
Yeah, that is a good point. You have to remember, we're looking at this from the brand side, the influencer side, and there's the consumer side. The consumer always has that relationship with that influencer, for example. And so just to piggyback, when you're negotiating on the influencer side, you have to convey to the brand, whether it's through the attorney or the agent or the influencer, the talent themselves, that this is the first time you're exposing your audience to whatever product or service that the brand may be looking for. And so there is that sort of that period of time where you need to get your followers, your fans, your audience acclimated to this product. And that may not happen on one post. And it's sure, I mean, based on experience, it's not going to happen after 3 posts or 3 stories. But that allows you, as on the influencer side, to negotiate that next contract or that option to renew based on certain types of metrics and growth. Whereas, you know, that first window of time when you're going to have that post and that content, you may not achieve that audience, the conversion that you're looking for based on the fact that it's new. But as you slowly develop authentic and natural content that's organic, hopefully you should see these analytics growing in further support of that next contract. So it's something to always keep in consideration is who is that consumer, what is that audience, and what is that message that you're giving?
So Cameron, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how has COVID affected the influencer marketing industry?
From my perspective, in a positive way. I've gotten more brand collaborations, as well as like my clients and then other like colleagues in this industry. We've gotten a lot more opportunities, again, with that long-term potential relationship, because they're seeing the benefit. Some people were just testing it out to see, okay, let me just test the market and see what's going on. We're all at home, everything's digital. Let me just see what's going on and if I can actually get my product out there. And then they're seeing a lot of benefits. So that's why it's kind of extending and growing, and a lot more businesses, brands, companies that were like, I would never do the social media thing. I would never do. They're like, let me just try a little something and see how it works. And then they see the benefit. And then now they're telling their friends and telling more people. So even bigger brands that we would think, of course, they're on social media. Of course, they're just now jumping into the industry. And I think it's a positive thing for them as well.
I'm not sure if Maddie is still here or if her internet is a little unstable, but Justin, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. I think this time last year, March, April, there was definitely a pause. Everyone was trying to figure out what was happening, and there was contracts and in your relationship with brands, there was an uncertainty. But then when we started to realize that we're not going to be able to be in person, a lot of the typical channels of communication and marketing and advertising, like whether it's flyers, billboards, and the dollars you're pumping for sort of the brick and mortar side, brands started to allocate that towards the digital side. They realized they can deliver products. And so the services and even the products that were more for the at-home use, workout equipment at home, cooking, home education for kids, all of this, the stuff that you need now at home it's booming. Just a couple of days ago, I was dealing with an influencer agreement for the first time on behalf of an influencer in the fishing industry. And the companies were like, wait, I never done this before. I don't even know what's going on. So I'm educating these brands while I'm negotiating on behalf of the influencer, but educating these brands that this is something where it's not going to change. It's here. Get on the train now, get an understanding for it. We'll help you, albeit through the influencer side, but we'll help you grow your understanding in this industry. And I'm just start seeing, just this unique area just continuously grow and grow and grow. So it's exciting, it's interesting, and I don't think it's going to be going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with what both of you said. And I think we also saw, and this is really not specific to COVID so much as it is the confluence of a pandemic plus massive social justice movements over the last 12 to 18 months. And when you have those two phenomena converging at the same time, I think the way it has impacted these deals is that there's a lot more attention being paid to tone, content selection, a lot more interest on behalf of brands in being a partner with the influencer and sort of curating that content or setting the theme and the tone versus perhaps maybe 2 years or 3 years ago where it was just sort of more like a sponsored content type of an understanding. Brands really want to select influencers who are going to be collaborators with them to make sure that the tone is right for the times. So I think we're seeing more of that. I do agree with Justin that, we're all looking at our screens a ton more, and therefore the categories of things that we're able to consume, no matter whether we're at home or out and about in public, has driven traffic up. And so that definitely impacts the demand for influencers who are knowledgeable in those spaces and know those communities well.
I love that you brought that up because back in the day, it was just all about either like putting on makeup or just getting cute and now us as creators, we're now expanding and talking more about things that are more important in our society and in our personal lives to build a deeper connection with our audience, which also on the back end benefits a brand because we have now a deeper connection with our audience to the point where if we show them something like at this point, they can trust us, they're going to honor our opinion, and it's a lot more organic and authentic. So I love that you brought that up because so many creators are now talking more about either like their 9-to-5 life or other professions or other things they like to do as opposed to just showing a makeup product. There's a story behind it.
Right. Agreed. And I think it makes the matchmaking process between brand and influencer a lot more interesting as well, because these are not just spokespeople you're engaging with. These are people who you really expect to be brand ambassadors because their values align with yours as a company, or, because they're putting content out there that makes sense for the products that you sell. And so, and it's also created an interesting phenomenon where there's a lot more attention being paid to influencer offline behavior, whether fair or unfair. And there's a little bit of both. Brands are way more, and if any of you who are sort of following along with us are putting these deals together, there's a lot more attention being paid to the behavior of the influencer offline and also in the past, because these footprints can be forever and this stuff comes up again during your current deal with the influencer. And what do you do about it as a brand? Do you use your morals clause in the contract and get out of the deal? Do you try to use corrective communication? And your reaction time is quite a bit shorter now than it would have been a few years ago, just because these are the times we're navigating in.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on both points there. Sharon makes a good point with the morality clause or moral clause there. It allows the brand to get out of a situation where whether the influencer or the talent does something, whether it's even illegal or just something just morally just not sitting right, it gives them the option to terminate the contract. And that's something that the offline behavior is something seriously to consider. And then Karen mentioned the component of the consumer, the client to trust. With COVID specifically, there's a lot of brands, a lot of products out there that are targeting the PPE component of things. And while we're all using social media, digital advertising to market these products, at the same time, the FTC is also heavily monitoring this. I got off a call earlier today with the FTC on this regard, and it's because the consumer is trusting those influencers, trusting that brand. If you're making representations about the quality of something, whether it's a mask or any type of product, you have to have the information and the ability to back that information up, because you're exposing whether it's a brand influencer to potential liability, whether it's under state law or federal law through the FTC. So it's something to be cautious about, because as we continue to go this way, the FTC is heavily monitoring this.
Yeah. influencer marketing is advertising. I mean, and if the digital natives listening to this are not going to probably want to be reminded of that, but it is. And therefore you've got, if you're going to talk about a product or a service, it's got to follow those old principles of the claim's got to be accurate, it's got to be provable, and it can't be misleading. And it's easy to lose that touch with that when you're focused on the entertainment aspect or the informational aspect of the content that's being created. But it's commercial advertising, and these partnerships are advertising deals, even though the tactics we're using are influencer tactics. So important to remember. I agree.
I will say it's something I actually appreciate. It could be because I went to law school, but I appreciate now that contracts and just the nitty-gritty details when it comes to collaborating is a lot more important now. Back in the day, they send the product, hey, we send you some money and that's it. And then now it's like, oh, no, I need a contract, see attached. And I think it's so important also for brands. They're now curating a lot more details in their guides and in their briefs that they're providing for us creators, where they go into detail about the FTC and the hashtags and things that need to be incorporated. And some brands that are new, sometimes I follow up and say, hey, I'm also going to do the hashtag ad. Like I need to provide that, or I'm also going to add this additional like clause or disclaimer that I need to add depending on what the product is. So I think it's super important, and I actually value it because not only is it protecting myself and my brand, it is protecting the brand I'm working with. And if I want to work with them long term, I want to make sure that we have a positive and cohesive relationship during the course of our agreement.
No, I love that you said that. And I would just tell anybody listening who represents a brand or anybody who works with a brand to collaborate with the influencer, help the influencer out. I mean, if you're working with somebody who's not done as many deals, give them a set of guidelines, do a little bit of education. The more deals an influencer does, the higher your expectations should be about their knowledge level about this stuff. But, do some basic training and put together some basic learning and helping materials that go along with your contract to help them understand what the rules of the road are. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. And the more you can put it in plain English, the higher the compliance you're going to experience.
Sharon hits a really good point there. On the brand side, the legal department or legal is very, very cautious on how they handle anything and everything. Whereas you have the other dynamic of the company, the marketing side, who wants to toe that line. And so you're constantly between legal and compliance and the marketing side pushing stuff. But then when they get to the influencer just sees the contract there. And so having the marketing side and legal side for the brand communicate to the influencer guidelines or helping them create and curate the content throughout the process just ensures that any exposure to liability is potentially mitigated because you're all working together. Because at the end of the day, it's not just trying to build one sale, you're trying to build a loyal relationship between the two in hopes of an extending relationship or extending the deal. To do that, the deal and the product and service has to be successful. So working together from all around, whether it's the influencer's agents, the attorney, as well as the brand and their marketing compliance, all people should work together to ensure that it's going to be a successful campaign.
Absolutely. And I know we're like beating the dead horse, but I think us as lawyers in this influencer space need to speak out more about it, because I've talked to too many, either they're younger or they're like new to the influencer space, or they're kind of just all of a sudden they grew up following and they're like, oh, well, it's a great brand, I'm just going to sign it without reading it. I think the more we talk about these conversations, about the importance of everyone, it's all a group effort. Let's just ask questions. If the brand doesn't know, if the influencer doesn't know, just talk. Let's just make it so it's not as awkward, or it's not as, well, I can't ask this, or I can't get clarity on this. And you should be able to on both sides, because again, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page during the entire course of our agreement. So I think the more we talk about this publicly and in our own communities is going to help everyone at the end of the day so that it can be seamless.
Yeah, agreed.
So Cameron, I want to briefly touch on something that you just mentioned yesterday in our panel regarding e-gaming. The attorneys were discussing a bit of sort of a hesitance in the gaming streamers and influencers as far as, and their attorneys, as far as having their attorneys sort of read their contracts and really advise them and advocate for them, more so because that's sort of a dream job to be get paid to play video games. And for a lot of people, being an influencer or having a brand sponsor you is a dream sort of come true. So my question is, how do we, create more trust between the influencers and the attorneys, more of that sort of team dynamic you guys were all touching upon?
I think one, that just says a lot about the attorney, because at the end of the day, this is our work, this is our career, and I'm not here to judge what you're trying to do with the contract. I'm here to review the contract and get you the best ethical and opportunity that I can with the contract, to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to, here are the obligations that you need to, the requirements you need to meet, and all of that things. I don't really care whether you're collaborating with you and your dog got this Instagram and they're making millions of dollars. That ain't got nothing to do with me. But I think it just comes to having a healthy communication with whoever you're working with your contracts, whether it's an attorney, your agent, whatever the case may be, just being open and honest. But that's interesting to me because gamers are like the top earners on YouTube. I don't know if anybody knows that. Gamers and kids with toys. So it's just like we've been saying, it's just a form of advertising and marketing. We wouldn't look side eye a car dealership for putting up a billboard or them doing a commercial. We would just sign the contract and go along, even though it's like maybe they don't necessarily need that type of advertising or marketing. So I think that just says more about the attorney. But I also think it's social media is so new and it feels uncomfortable. Like, you're gonna pay this 13-year-old $20,000 to do a 10-minute video. It doesn't sound like, it's like, what, are y'all serious? But then when you look on the other side, the more you work with creators, the more you see the analytics and the behind the scenes and everything that goes into really doing the full production, that they're playing the creative director, they're the hairstylist, they're the stylist, they're the photographer, they're the marketer, they're the advertiser, they're the graphic designer. A lot of people are playing all of these roles. The more you look at it like that as a form of creativity, a form of art and a full production, I think it becomes a little less like, what the heck is going on? But I think it's just the more that we talk about it and getting the right people in the right rooms to explain them, hey, I get it. It's weird to me. It's weird, but that's something they love to do. It's a profession that's growing, and it's a profession that's beneficial for us as lawyers navigating this space, as well as businesses and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I would add to that this is really no different a phenomena. I mean, the technology is different, the venues of exposure are different, but this is no different than very, very young and experienced talent, if you will, making a living in traditional sports or traditional entertainment, or any of the other ways in which a talent is marketable. It's just that there are so many more opportunities now for exposure. And because the deals themselves can be smaller initially, it can snowball into an exploitation situation, quite frankly, where a young gamer in this example is not getting a fair deal, and doesn't realize it. It's a function of having to have a good team around you as that gamer / influencer. And it's really no different than in those other industry examples I cited. It's just that the deals can happen faster, and therefore I think it can snowball out of control a little bit more quickly. So I think everybody just needs to be sensitive to that fact when they're putting these deals together.
Also, I think, unfortunately, like when social media began, it started off with a negative connotation. So now us trying to lean more into the digital space and appreciate it and encourage it, it feels just uncomfortable just because people used to view social media as a negative thing. So I think once we kind of shift that narrative, it's going to make it a lot easier for everyone involved. And sometimes even as a creator, we feel uncomfortable, like that this is what we do as a job. It can be uncomfortable when we know there are other professions, lawyers, doctors, that we feel as if they are directly helping society a lot better. So it just takes time for everyone on the same playing field to just navigate the space in a healthy way.
Yeah, agreed.
And from the legal side, there's a lot of legal doctrine that helps support how we get to these numbers. Trademark law is very important when you analyze and negotiate a deal, the publicity rights. So an influencer may not necessarily be a celebrity or vice versa. Sometimes you have athletes who don't have the ability to, quote, influence, though they are a celebrity, and vice versa. So you may not have it, or you may have an influencer who doesn't have a high publicity rate. And so the numbers and valuation, how you calculate the value for a name and likeness, right? Kylie Jenner, for example, who is an influencer and also a celebrity, the valuation for that is a component that needs to be considered into the contract, as well as the value for that trademark, whether it's a license. And so protecting your goodwill on the licensing, for the trademark, for the publicity rights, as well as the underlying content that you're creating, whether it's the brand who's going to use it or the influencer who's going to post it, the copyright to that. So these legal doctrines all need to be from the lawyer side. You need to look at it and advise your client, hey, this is how you evaluate each one of these. And in totality, it goes into the deal. So it's not just an arbitrary number that comes together and say, hey, this is what we use. But there is a meticulous factor system in which you analyze and then negotiate. And then going into that negotiation, you're in a better position from strength to convince the other person, the brand, why your client is justified in receiving or requesting those numbers.
Right, because there is nothing worse than you driving down the street as a creator and you seeing your face on a billboard that you didn't get paid for. No one wants to experience that. I can't pay my light bill with a makeup product. So I think the more we think about it like that, like this is a career. We need the right documentation, the right lawyers, the right legal expectations on both parties in order for this to actually work.
Yeah, and I think that's well said. And Justin, you make a really excellent point as well about the fact that putting together an influence deal is an amalgam of intellectual property law rights, advertising, traditional advertising law compliance, FTC regulatory oversight. Which is what makes it so fascinating, right? But it's not one faceted. There are lots of different areas of law that converge. And that's just on the legal side of things. That's not even accounting for how are you going to determine what metrics you want to follow to figure out, pricing and compensation, and also measurement of success.
We tackle in the traditional sort of model industry, when it's going to like magazines or work, when there was a license, you have a day rate, and that day rate is calculated by multiple factors. And then you have the usage for whatever is going to be distributed, whether it's through a magazine or a billboard, now social media. So the day rate and the usage, these two components have multiple sub-factors, and those sub-factors all come together in that valuation. So it's important to see those and negotiate, and your client may be starting off, maybe a micro influencer, i.e. a smaller influencer, and they're not having that ability to negotiate a higher day rate. The day rate goes to, let's say, the time that it takes to create that content, the work, the labor of whether you're flying to the brand's headquarters and shooting it on site, or if you're creating it at your own, your bedroom type of thing. So those day rates are critical. And sometimes the brand may just lose sight of that and say, oh, we're just going to pay you to post on social. But pushing for that day rate, even if it's in social media, is how we've grown this from the older days when it was the modeling industry.
Well, sorry, Cameron. I just wanted to throw onto that. We probably won't have time to get into this in particular, but as you gain prominence and as you gain to the level of celebrity, if you're doing a deal with a celebrity influencer, there's also SAG-AFTRA union compliance that you've got to pay attention to. I don't think a lot of lawyers who get into this space understand that if you're working with an influencer who's also a member of the performers unions, you got to follow their contract as well as deal with all the other stuff we've just talked about. And so that's another layer of complexity that you need to be prepared for if you're working for that top echelon of brands who want celebrities as their influencers.
Can you all hear me? My internet is a little unstable.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so my next question is for all of you, and I think we're all just curious, what does a typical work day look like for you all working in this field?
Well, mine's slightly different because I'm juggling both. So it depends on if it's like a content creation day, but if it's not, then it's just a lot of sitting down at a desk and reviewing contracts and looking up, doing a lot of research on the back end about what is working on social media, what's not, how can I get my client to a higher rate? Have they just bought new equipment? Are they hiring a photographer for this opportunity? What brand are they working with? Have they worked with them before? Have they promoted their brand in an organic way before? Can we use that to leverage a higher rate? just trying to work out just exact, kind of like Justin said, like going through like, what are the day rates? What exactly does the breakdown look like when it comes to coming to that rate? I think I spend probably a lot of time on that. And then of course, putting on my 100% lawyer hat and thinking, okay, what does this look like if they can't send the products? Can we add something in the clause where the brand is going to be obligated to pay for the influencer or reimburse them if they have to go purchase the product? That was a big thing last year when, I mean, nobody was getting their mail. Okay, we all was waiting at the door. So I had to go out myself, clients and everyone in the industry, we had to do a lot of purchasing on our own. Is there a reimbursement clause in there? If there's not, the brand's looking at you like, you said the rate and that's all I'm giving you. So getting to the nitty gritty of the contracts a lot of times is what I'm doing. I communicate with it's a little non-traditional, of course, but I communicate with my clients via Voxer. So it's like a voice messaging app. So I always check that, see what they have going on. If I need to send a quick voice message, they'll send over the contracts. Sometimes I'm on Zoom calls. I think we're all on Zoom calls a lot more now. On Zoom calls, just either talking to them about what I sent over as far as notes and my suggestions for something. I'm on calls with brands, whether it's their brand they're working with or a brand I'm working with, to get another influencer on board with a collaboration or a campaign opportunity. Scrolling on social media, just the bare bone basics, but a lot of times it's just sitting down and reviewing lots of contracts.
Yeah, for me too. I guess it breaks into two components from the day-to-day. It's either the transactional side or the litigation side. My core, I'm a deep passion for intellectual property, business law, and then advertising. And this is sort of where you birth the influencer. My day-to-day typically is maybe more 75% litigation. Depends on where we're going. Pre-COVID, it was more transactional, but right now I'm seeing a lot of litigation. So right now I'm prepping for trial, for example, in an intellectual property case. So it's a lot of just reading, a lot of just, not the fun jazz right now, just prepping exhibits, preparing just how you're going to deal with the rules of evidence, for example, as you get ready for court. So that's what I'm doing around the clock, literally. And then other times we're negotiating with a fishing company for a transactional deal and drafting the contract. So, I really enjoy both sides, litigation and transaction, but with that comes a lot of juggling, a lot of shifting gears. And I love this area of law. I'm very blessed to be able to do what I love to do. It doesn't feel like work, but with it, it's a lot of shifting gears to be able to do sort of the litigation transactional side.
Yeah, what I would just add to that, I mean, as I've, my responsibilities at my firm have transitioned a lot more over to basically the kinds of things that a business owner needs to pay attention to, managing our clients, making sure they're happy. In this area specifically, I spend quite a bit of time just strategically advising our clients on what they need to make sure they're asking their clients and also the influencers, helping them. Our clients are primarily marketing services firms, and most occasions they're the intermediaries between the influencer and the brand. So helping them do that job well and making sure they're asking the right questions of both parties, and also protecting them from liability that they shouldn't be assuming, because they're not the ones out there pushing the content or whose brand is represented. So, and I enjoy being a strategist, and I'm very lucky that I get to spend a lot of my practice time, my law practice time on that level. And so that's kind of what my day tends to look like, in addition to, care and feeding of our clients and making sure that they get what they need from my team.
Okay, we have one last question before we open it up to anybody who has questions in the audience, and this one's a little bit twofold. So the first part of the question is this, field that you've all said, yes, how fast is it growing? Sort of, is there a need for lawyers in this field? And then what advice do you have for any sort of attorneys or young interested in this field and want to explore it more?
Sure.
I think it's important to experience.
Go ahead, Justin.
Experience is for everything. Experience is is important. You know, you learn things from the legal doctrine side in law school, and use that time to absorb the doctrine, intellectual property more than ever. Take advantage of the classes that are offered. I know there at FIU, there is the intellectual property certificate. Professor Travis, Professor Tutu, great professors, very knowledgeable. And even now, a lot of what I learned then, I use in everyday practice. I use that time to learn the doctrine, because when you're out in practice, you're going to be doing the experience side. But the experience side requires you to jump on social media, understand how it actually works. What is a story? Understanding the intricate details of TikTok, for example, because that's where things are going. And you have to be able to understand it, to understand what your client is communicating to you. You can fully appreciate the intricate details of how the law component and the doctrine of what you learned applies to what you're trying to deliver. So sort of getting your hands in that social media, understanding the advertising, understand what's going on. Law 360 is a great way to receive updates from sort of the legal side on evolution of the law. But TMZ is important as well, from like sort of the influencer and marketing and the celebrity side. So having that sort of dynamic, you have to do that to be able to fully understand what is going on in today's age. Because what happened, Fire, for example, Fire Festival is no longer the case today. It's always evolving. So you have to keep up with it, and to do so requires experience.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would add to that in addition to getting really sound learning on the legal fundamentals of IP, advertising law, it's always served me well to know as much about my client's industry as I do about my own craft. And so really, as you advance in your legal career, and if influence marketing is a particular area of interest to you, not only knowing the technology platforms and the social media platforms that are hot at the time, and they will change, they'll be different by the time you start practicing. If you're midway through your legal education, they will be different, I promise you, when you graduate than they are today. So understanding them, and I think choosing a couple channels to really dive deep into and to understand the dynamics of. So not only to know that, but to understand your client's industry. If you want an expertise in the beauty industry, the children's products industry, you need to know as much about the dynamics of putting these deals together from the brand's perspective and the influencer's perspective as you do from the technology perspective of the social media platform. And you need to do all that while you are learning to understand and apply the law too. So it's a constant learning game. You never stop learning, even when you're walking down that aisle with your diploma.
I agree 200%.
They pretty much covered it all.
Yeah, I agree 200%. It's experience. Yeah.
That was great. That was pretty much it. Not much to add. That was great. That's it. As long as, because I think we mentioned this, but what is so great about us working in this industry as lawyers is we do get to wear a lot of different hats. So with that, we have to be knowledgeable in all of those hats. Sometimes we have to explain to a new creator, like, let me just break it down as to why you should even be charging for this. Because sometimes we just love what we do so much, or it's a great brand, we'll take whatever payment. Wait a minute, let's back up. You shouldn't be agreeing to usage rights for free for a year. And you remember, driving down the street, see your face on a billboard, it's free, that's not cute. So we have to wear a lot of different hats, even if it's just educating them on the nuances of social media. So being able to understand the platform, the terminology, Instagram Reels, Instagram Guides, like knowing how it works and how it functions on that side, as well as adding that legal side, it's so important to be able to balance them both. And practice makes perfect. The more contracts I review for myself, the better I can help my clients. The more clients I help, the better I can help the next client, because words change in these contracts, y'all, because it's so new. Everyone's trying to figure it out. So just the practice really makes perfect.
Yeah, I want to add one small point to that from what Sharon said there. I don't know what you guys' hobbies are. Let's say, for example, it's fitness with the at-home technology and sort of changing away from the gyms. We're talking and focusing on, Instagram, YouTube, the conventional, and like Sharon said, it's going to change when you guys are out there. The tonals, the mirrors, all of this equipment now requires digital coaching, for example. And so that's a name and likeness component from the legal doctrine where you're putting someone on that platform. And so From the lawyer side, you're going to have to negotiate those rights very similar to what you would negotiate if it was, let's say, a Instagram post. And so as the technology grows, if you find yourself that you're interested in, let's say, the fitness, be aware, be alert to what you're seeing, because those are platforms that when you do practice, you're going to be able to negotiate. Or if it's on the beauty side, same exact thing, or the TV side, same exact thing. So whatever your interest is, couple it with your passion for the legal side, and together you'll find yourself and you're falling into, like I think Cameron said, you saw an opportunity and you just in 2014, 15, you just ran with it. That's what I did. You just kind of run with the opportunity because it fits what you do. It just feels natural.
So we did get one question or a couple questions in the chat. One of them is from Leah. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. I got an unstable internet pop-up. Anyway. So she says that you guys mentioned morality clauses and corrective communications. And she wants to know, are there any other provisions that should be included in these types of contracts and are sometimes left out, or are there other key provisions that should be included when drafting these contracts?
I'll throw in there indemnification real quick. Indemnification is a huge one. That is the, if I get sued by someone else type of thing, I'm coming after you. It's important. There's so many different ways that comes into play. There's so many ways that you need to sort of frame that clause to apply to your situation. For example, if you have a can, right, that is a defective product, if you're the influencer who's marketing that product and that product that's sold to a consumer is defective, that consumer may target you for a lawsuit, whether it's a product liability lawsuit. And so you weren't, as influencer, controlling the quality of that product. It's not your fault that that product was defective. So that indemnification provision is going to protect that influencer to defer to that brand. So there's a lot of different clauses, but that's one that may get omitted. It's important because when it does happen, you don't want to be exposed from, let's say it's a small, let's say $1,500 post. That product liability case from the personal injury side of things is going to be way more expensive than that. And that clause is going to at least help ensure that mitigation of exposure.
Yeah, I would add to that I think that most influencer agreements, and Cameron mentioned this earlier, how you learn more as you do more deals. But I think that most influencer agreements probably aren't as thorough as they need to be in terms of the limits and the extents to which the brand can use the content, or not only who will own the content. Are you creating a content for ownership deal on behalf of the brand? Are you really just renting the content and the influence for a period of time? What is the intention as to what will happen with that content after the deal has concluded? Because if it includes the brand's identity, the influencer is only going to be able to make very tiny limited use of it. And if the influencer no longer wants to be associated with the brand, then the brand likewise is not going to be able to do a ton with it. So who's going to own the content? On what other platforms might the brand be able to use it? And just nailing that all down in the agreement is something that usually is not done thoroughly enough in my experience. So, and you almost never get it 100% right because you can never think of every single scenario, but spend some time when you're doing the deal thinking about content uses and length of use.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. You took the words out of my mouth, because now I'm starting to see, because brands are understanding the importance of being more clear and detailed in contracts, but sometimes they take it a bit too far. I've been seeing brands want to basically negotiate complete full rights and ownership of the entire piece of content. But the issue with that on the creator side is I may have a network reach out, which just happened to a client, a network reach out, and they want to include a snippet of it that had nothing to do with the brand, just a snippet of it, and include it on a commercial. But then my client, because they signed it before reaching out to me, they had already signed it. So then they had to go back to tell the brand, and therefore the brand was able to get the full compensation for that opportunity because the creator signed over their full rights. So definitely ownership. Something that's probably like small but important, especially after the pandemic, is, now don't let me not butcher the word, but it's like force majeure or major, however you want to say it. But that's really important because, again, if I have a deadline for a campaign and I'm like waiting on the product and then I can't go outside to get it because we're all quarantined, just adding those extra factors so you can have a little bit of a cushion to be able to maneuver things around and dates, because brands get funny, but also also, to me, probably one of the most important things outside of like usage, ownership, exclusivity, I need to know who I can work with, is the payment terms. We need to get those clear. I need to know how I'm getting paid, when I'm getting paid. Is there a 50% upfront? When does that start? What happens if I start performance of the collaboration? I've already started creating the content and then like, oh, change of plans, no campaign. Am I able to get some type of prorated compensation with that? So that's probably definitely an area outside of other important areas that I really heavily spend time on.
I have another question from Shakina, who wants to know, do any of you have any experience with or unique legal situations with virtual influencers, such as AI-based or avatar characters?
I have yet to do a deal, where the brand wants to use a virtual influencer or an AI-based character for the campaign. So I can't speak exclusively. I can just, putting my antennas on to just try to guess what the issues there would be. It'd be the definite length and parameters of the use of the likeness of the AV created character. I can see that as being probably one of the most prominent issues in that deal, but no, we have not yet done one. Haven't had a brand ask one of the agencies in our client network or express any interest in doing one yet, but I'm sure it's coming.
This area is definitely coming, if not already arrived, especially when you remove the music festival industry, right? The in-person ability to get together. You have to, there's all that lost money that needs to go somewhere, and it's going towards the virtual. So I'm working on creation of, on the platform side, creating a virtual platform to bring people together, whether it's the music or whether it's an educational setting, but bringing people together in a virtual world to conduct some virtual thing. And so that's something that's in the works. It's picked up because of COVID, and it's the direction that we're going now.
Yeah, I haven't dealt with that yet. How I would think of it's kind of like voiceover actors and actresses, because sometimes the person it's their voice, but it's not their image. But again, just where is that going? How is it being repurposed? Are you using my voice? That's my likeliness. Are you using my voice in order to use in like a digital platform and then sell that? So then now you're profiting off of my voice. So it's really like getting into that nitty gritty of where is it being used? How is it being used? How much am I having to do in order for it to be used? Really heavily in the usage rights and licensing.
And the law is catching up in that area as well. And I know I just back to education, reading up on this, New York I think recently just passed on the avatar and the digital side of things, use of the name and likeness component of it, because it comes down to the core principles of law. The doctrines of law that you're learning right now are just formed in different ways, and the laws are starting to catch up on that. New York, I think, is hitting that avatar component right now.
Great, thank you. So we'd like to open up the floor to anybody with any questions. I see Adrian, you have a question.
Yeah, I think I have a few somewhat small questions, but I was interested in knowing how large your client roster is at any one point in time, especially because all the influencers seem to have like very nuanced and different circumstances.
Well, our client base doesn't consist of influencers themselves as a community. We're working with the agencies to put the deals together. It can vary. I would say a few hundred at any one time, not all active. Of course, we're a small firm, intentionally so. And so Justin may have a different experience.
Yeah, I don't just work with influencers. I work with brands. I know it's in the influencer side, it grows fast because they are a community. When they're understanding their deals and they see things happening, they're quick to refer other influencers to that attorney. So the relationship is as an attorney is very important, because keeping that open communication with your clients. Some attorneys like to create good boundaries. I like to text, I DMs, I communicate, and they start to communicate and feel like they're open with you. And through that, though, there's a sense of sort of just referral. And so they're able to quickly give you sort of communities of people and you have conversations, whether they be compliance or not. It's just networking. And so I don't specifically have a specific number, but it's as you grow those networks, they just continuously just keep growing.
I keep my clients very small because I am a creator, so I like to focus on that first. But I also do very individualized, I guess, work with the clients. So usually between 5 to 10, I may increase it. Right now I have a very small team. It's me and one other person working with me. We're looking to expand, but we do everything from helping them with their social media strategy, doing social media audits, depending on the client and what they need, reviewing their contracts, helping them with email drafting, telling them the importance of using professional language in their email, even if it's the brand using an emoji, you don't do that, or trying to communicate with and making sure that they understand their business, their CEO, they run their business like they should professionally, even though it's fun and even though it's exciting, and doing a lot of like consulting on that aspect. So I really help in an intimate setting. So usually 5 to 10, so I can keep that personal, but once I grow, then I'll probably expand it just a little bit, but I like the personal nature of it.
And then my one other question was really about gifting. I know that gifting is like a huge part of, or at least it used to be. It used to be a huge part of the influencer space. And I wanted to know if you've seen a decline in that being a form of payment now that things are more serious, or also the implications of gifting, because sometimes those gifts are then turned around and resold, and what, conflicts that might have with the agreements that you have in place with brands. I just wanted some insight into that.
It's pretty straightforward. If the influencer receives any form of consideration, whether it is a gift of a product or a ticket to an event or a meal or a cup of coffee, that's perfectly fine. The rule is just you must disclose. There's nothing wrong with paying consideration in any form the parties mutually negotiate. You just have to disclose it as an influencer. And so I think it's still a very popular practice to incentivize potential influencers with free product samples. That hasn't really gone away. I mean, influencers who have larger communities are sophisticated enough to be asking for other things too, in addition to that. But there's nothing evil about that. You just are required as a brand to make sure the influencer has disclosed it. And as an influencer, you got to make sure you know your hashtags. And that it's clear in your content that you're being compensated, even if it's with a gift.
I think the small caveat to gifting, I'm not against gifting 100%, is if they're obligating me to do something. That's when we get into the legalese of things. If they just send me a product, because some brands you're on PR, so they just send products all the time. And if they're not requiring me to post or talk about it, it's just like if I get a gift from a parent, kind of. Of course, I personally, I'm like, hey, y'all, I've sent this, like, cool, great. But if they're not saying, I send you this product, I send you a makeup lipstick product, I need you to post an Instagram in feed. So then they send it in order for me to post. But if they're just, hey, we're just sending this, we're launching, no obligation, then you have a little bit of flexibility. You should at least say, hey, they sent this, but you don't necessarily have to hashtag sponsor, because it's not sponsored, because they're not obligating you to post about it. So there's a little bit of nuance in there, but I think the problem is brands aren't, just like Sharon was saying, like brands aren't clear on when they send the product, and they think, oh, well, they're going to post about it. So I always say, if I am accepting this gifting opportunity, just putting you on notice that I'm not obliged to post or even communicate or discuss anything in regards to this gifting product. And if you'd like to discuss an opportunity where I would have to post, we can discuss that at a later date, or discuss that now, whatever that looks like. But I think making sure that's clear, that both people know, just because I receive the product, I don't have to post. So that's clear, because I've ran into that a few times, and I'm just have to pull back out the email. Well, please see attached that I never said I was gonna post. So I think that's only reason where it gets, but gifting is great because that's how you learn about new products. When I think of creators, I think of them as guinea pigs. Like they're testing out products. They're trying to show you, hey, this is what's new. I liked it. It might not work for me, but it might work for you, etc. Because we've all been there where our favorite product was discontinued. Ain't nothing worse than a discontinued product. So I love to have a backup. So it's great being able to share so many different products.
I agree 1000% with everything you just said, including the discontinued beauty product stuff.
It's the worst.
We need another hour to talk about that.
Yeah, I think gifting, the more brands are jumping onto the influencer wave, so to speak. And that's kind of the first thing that they think of is, hey, let me give some gift as an exchange. And that could be fine, like we were talking about. But that's a segue into negotiation. It allows you to say, great, because before I even post, I want to experience the product. I need to see what it is, because like I said earlier, authenticity and creating organic content is now more than ever more important. Your followers, they're not idiots. They know when you're posting for pay. So creating an authentic relationship with the brand requires you to experience the product. And so to be able to create the content as well, you need the product. And so, yeah, give me the product, but also give me compensation as well, and pay me for it as well. And back to the legal doctrines, because of the copyright, because of the publicity rights, or just simply because of the data that I have on the advertising side, allows you to negotiate. But I think it always starts with a product, and then it's product, but then compensation on top, or monetary compensation on top.
That just made me think. Also, don't be afraid to negotiate I guess a period of time where you can test out the product. I do that, especially with skincare products. Like if you send me a product, how can I post the next day? I don't know if it works. So right. I think also negotiating that in the beginning, like, okay, even if it is a paid opportunity, I would like to take 2 to 4 weeks or a month to try the product and test it out prior to being obligated to post. So incorporating that's why it's such a great space to be able to negotiate really any term of the contract at some point.
These deals don't happen overnight. And so when the product reaches out and then the influencer talent or the agency reaches out to the attorney, if the attorney is looking from the contract side, you may not be dealing with all of that components of it. But if you're the one who's actually negotiating the deal, give me the product first. Let's get that product tried. Let's allow the influencer to work it in their system, see if it works with them while we talk about the terms. And so while you do the mailing, while they try it, then if they like it, great, we'll continue. But we've already started that process, because these deals do not happen overnight. Sometimes they take 3, 4, 5, 6 months longer, because there's so much that you need to sort of hit. And you might as well get that understanding of whether we like the product or not first. So just ship that off, and then we'll continue our conversation while that's going on.
I just want to piggyback on something you just said, Justin, really quickly. The lawyers listening here today, one of your biggest challenges, and this space is a perfect example of it, one of your biggest challenges is when you are working with marketing, entertainment, or anything adjacent to those sorts of disciplines, it is extremely fast moving. And one of your biggest challenges is going to be slowing the business people and the creatives down enough to understand that you do need time to properly put the deal together so that everybody's protected and that everybody's compensation reflects the intention, et cetera. I can't tell you how many times, and our clients are in the advertising and marketing world, and this happens every week, where they started the work 2 days ago, and oh, by the way, can we have a contract by tomorrow? Justin's right. It takes longer to think through the implications of these deals. And one of your biggest challenges as a lawyer counseling clients who are putting these together is going to be slowing everybody down enough to make sure they're all on the same page. That's real life. That's what part of your real life will be very much like when you're out there practicing and putting these deals together as a lawyer.
Absolutely. And also not being afraid to say, hey, if you didn't like the product, send it back. Like, you don't ever want to ruin that relationship, 1 with the brand, and then 2 with your audience. So I've sent products back, money back, all types of things. So it's a long process. And then also the brand having to review the content, and then them going back and forth again on the negotiating, because sometimes what they say in the email isn't what they sent in the contract. So then now you as the attorney is having to navigate the conversation with the agent to say, well, that's not what was agreed upon. Well, this is what the contract is actually saying. And it could take months on like average.
When you're dealing with, if you're negotiating for the influencer and the influencer is your client, as the attorney, manage their expectations. Make sure that they understand that, hey, listen, I'm getting this deal done, but at the end of the day, I have my license. You guys are all in it right now, working towards getting your law license, and you're not going to just skip over the hurdles just to get this done. Manage expectations. Be clear. Communicate. You're building the relationship, but at the same time, you have to ensure that you're not overwhelming yourself. You have other things that are going on. Like I said, when you're, at least from me, when I'm shifting gears between litigation and transactional, there's times when I need to get emotion out. And I can't necessarily work on it. So, hey, I can do this, and we're looking at it, let's say a turnaround of next week. Does that fit the schedules? Make sure that you're able to work it. So just manage expectations. It's very important, because if you do not clearly communicate on the front end, you're trying to scramble on the back end, and then all of a sudden you have a disgruntled client. So deal with it on the front end and be very clear.
Hi, I have a quick question. Sharon, Justin, Cameron, thank you so much for joining us here today. I've really enjoyed the discussion so far. I'm wondering, a big issue in this area is celebrity false endorsements. So how do you protect your client whose image may be being posted without their consent and police that activity?
Yeah, so indemnification, warranties. So a lot of times, if you're on the brand and you're contracting out for, let's say, an agency or a web designer or anyone else, if whoever you're dealing with in the second part of that contract, you don't know where they're creating this, whether it's a celebrity who doesn't give the consent to use their name or likeness, or maybe it's just a photo of a building that was never consented. You cannot know every dynamic. So you put that in the representation of warranties to ensure that the person who's giving you that intellectual property warrants that it's original, that they have the rights to use it. And to the extent that they do not, and you're sued by that other person, you're now looking for that indemnification. So ensuring that you see the dynamics, all the different moving parties, is important, and goes back to taking the time to draft this contract with that foresight in mind, because with software now more than ever, it's easy to use facial recognition. An influencer and law firms who represent influencers quickly scan the internet and say, this restaurant is using an influencer's or celebrities that is image without consent. There's a quick suit. Damages are so easy. You look at one deal, and in the courts, there's tons of case law on this. The courts are saying, you didn't negotiate that deal, the damages are going to be on the higher end. So just ensuring that representation is tucked away is going to help mitigate that exposure for the brand or the one who's obtaining that intellectual property.
I agree with that. I mean, obviously you need a well-drafted contract as the underpinning for any remedy you're going to seek. But at the end of the day, I think it matters what corrective action are you actually seeking. Is the influencer, and they may not be considered celebrity level, but they still have publicity rights to their likeness and their identity. And what do they want? Is it just a question of them objecting to the usage because it's uncompensated and it's outside of the scope of the original agreement that was, struck? If that's the case, then you're looking at simply getting them some additional compensation to expand that license to that additional use. If it's simply that they flat out object to any association between their likeness, their name, their identity, and whatever the use is out there that was unauthorized, then you need to rely upon, your equitable remedies. You want to stop it as quickly as possible. And your goal is not so much about the compensation as it is about stopping the offending activity. So it depends on what your business goal is relative to, your personal brand as an influencer. And then you need the language in the contract that was negotiated as the supportive basis for the remedy that you pursue.
Absolutely.
To piggyback on Sharon's point right there, when you said the usage, one of the factors, at least I put under analyzing that usage, is sort of the embarrassment factor. If the brand, let's say it's something that's you're not going to sit really well with the client, that pushes the negotiation of the compensation upwards or downwards. So that embarrassment factor or the relationship factor is something that be considered just as a factor in the overall negotiation for the usage component.
Absolutely. They basically covered everything. The indemnification is huge. And also, just like Sharon said, renegotiating. If I'm working with a brand, and sometimes, unfortunately, brands and businesses, they don't have a legal department, and they just kind of pick a contract, throw it in there, send it to the creator, and then no one knows what's really going on. So then once you come back as the creator, like, oh, hey, you didn't agree to this. Sometimes the brand literally just thought they didn't understand that how limited their usage rights really were. So they're willing to negotiate and say, you know what, here, I'm willing to negotiate an additional rate for us to continue to use it. Or they're like, you know what, no problem, I'll take it down. I'll send a cease and desist letter to them if they don't listen to my email and I need to mail it to them or send it, keep following up with them. So a lot of times it's just, again, making sure the contract is clear and straight to the point and detailed enough, but also making sure that everyone actually understands what they're agreeing to. Sometimes that's really where the issue is, that people just assume they have like all this additional rights and additional ways to be able to use the contract content when it's like, that's, no one ever agreed to that.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions from anybody in the audience? Okay, then with that, thank you guys so much for being here today. This was an absolutely fascinating panel. We really are so grateful that you guys took the time out of your day to come speak with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.